The day my father died, my stepmother didn't shed a single tear. Instead, she stood in his study, perfectly manicured nails tapping against his mahogany desk, already making plans to modernize the house he had loved so dearly. I was 26, still raw with grief, when Diana started dismantling my childhood home piece by piece. Every antique, every family heirloom, everything that whispered of history and memory, she marked for sale with cold efficiency. "It's all so dreary," she would say, waving her hand dismissively at the carefully curated art collection my father had spent decades building. "This house needs a fresh start." What she meant was that she needed to erase every trace of my father's first wife, my mother, and the life they had built together. The painting hung in my father's study for as long as I could remember. It was an unusual piece, dark and moody, depicting what appeared to be a medieval banquet scene. My father had acquired it at an estate sale 20 years ago, drawn to its mysterious atmosphere and intricate details. "There's something special about this one, Sophia," he used to tell me, his eyes twinkling with that familiar excitement he got when discussing art. "Look at the brushwork, the composition. Someone very talented painted this, someone who knew exactly what they were doing." I spent countless hours in that study as a child, curled up in the leather armchair beneath the painting, watching my father work. He would often glance up at it, sometimes muttering to himself about the curious details he kept discovering. A hidden figure in the shadows, an unusual symbol woven into a tapestry in the background. But now, barely a month after we laid him to rest, Diana had already listed it for sale along with everything else. I found her in the study one morning, correcting movers as they took down the painting that had washed over so many precious moments between my father and me. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice catching. "That was Dad's favorite." Diana barely glanced at me, too busy typing on her phone. "I'm selling it. Already found a buyer, some local antique dealer. He's giving me $500 for it." My heart stopped. $500. But Dad always said it was special. She let out a sharp laugh. "Your father had a romantic imagination when it came to art. It's just a dusty old painting, probably some amateur's work from the last century. Be grateful anyone's willing to pay anything for it." I reached for my wallet with trembling hands. "I'll buy it. I'll give you $500. Diana's perfectly painted lips curved into a cruel smile. "Too late. The deal's already done. Besides," she added, examining her manicure, "your father's will give me complete control over the house and its contents. I can do whatever I want with all of this junk." She was right about the will. My father, in his infinite trust and optimism, had left everything to his new wife of 5 years, believing she would honor his wishes and family traditions. His only direct bequest to me had been a small trust fund that wouldn't mature until I turned 30. I watched helplessly as the movers carried away the painting, along with the last pieces of my father's beloved collection. That night, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the few photographs and small mementos I had managed to save from Diana's purge, and made myself a promise. I would find that painting again, no matter what it took. My search began the next day. I visited every antique shop in the city, but none had received the mysterious medieval banquet scene. The dealer Diana claimed to have sold it to didn't seem to exist. It was as if the painting had vanished into thin air. What Diana didn't know was that I had inherited more than just my father's trust fund. I had inherited his passion for art and his meticulous attention to detail. During those long afternoons in his study, I had absorbed everything he taught me about art history, authentication, and the subtle signs that distinguish a masterwork from a copy. I also had something else. A photograph I had taken of the painting one quiet afternoon, capturing a moment when sunlight had fallen across its surface in just the right way, illuminating details that were usually hidden in shadow. I had taken it simply because I loved the way the light played on the canvas, but now it became my most valuable clue. I began researching obsessively, comparing my photograph to archived images of medieval paintings. I reached out to art historians, spent hours in university libraries studying similar works from the period. Slowly, pieces of the puzzle began to emerge. The style wasn't amateur work as Diana had claimed. It showed mastery of techniques specific to 15th century Flemish painting. The pigments, from what I could tell from my father's notes and my own research, were consistent with materials used in that period. But most intriguingly, there were symbols and details in the background that suggested this might be more than just another medieval banquet scene. 6 months into my search, I met Dr. Elena Martinez, an art historian specializing in medieval European painting. She spent hours studying my photograph, her excitement growing visibly. These symbols here, she pointed to barely visible markings in the tapestry depicted in the background. They're incredibly significant. If this is what I think it is, she looked up at me, her eyes bright with academic fervor. We need to find this painting. But finding it proved impossible. Every lead went cold. Every potential trail disappeared. Diana claimed she had no record of the buyer, and the painting seemed to have vanished into the vast, shadowy world of private art sales. I was about to give up when I received an unexpected call from my father's old attorney, Mr. Harrison. "Sophia," he said, his voice carrying a note of urgency I had never heard before. "I found something in your father's old files that you need to see. It's about the painting." An hour later, I sat in his office, staring at a document that changed everything. It was a letter, dated just weeks before my father's death, from an art authentication service in London. They had been secretly analyzing photographs and descriptions of the painting for months. Their conclusion made my hands shake. The painting showed all the hallmarks of being an unknown work by a master whose paintings now sold for millions. But they needed to examine the actual piece to confirm their findings. My father had died before he could pursue this lead, before he could protect his discovery. And now Diana had sold it for a mere $500, probably to someone who knew exactly what they were buying. I read the letter again, anger building inside me. Diana's quick sale, her dismissal of the painting's value, her conveniently missing records of the buyer. It all felt too neat, too calculated. "There's something else," Mr. Harrison said, pulling out another document. "Your father added a codicil to his will just days before he died. It was supposed to be about the painting, but he passed before it could be properly executed and witnessed." He paused, adjusting his glasses. However, he did leave this note with it. The note was in my father's familiar handwriting, already shaky from his illness. "The painting must go to Sophia. She's the only one who truly sees what I see." I sat back, my mind racing. The painting wasn't just valuable, it was potentially worth millions. And somewhere out there, someone had it. Someone who had taken advantage of Diana's supposed ignorance, or perhaps her deliberate cooperation. "Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "I need you to help me find out exactly how that sale was handled. Every detail, every document, every person involved." He nodded, already reaching for his phone. "I'll contact the bank for records of the transaction. If money changed hands, there will be a trail." As I left his office that evening, clutching copies of my father's documents, I felt a new determination. This wasn't just about recovering a valuable painting anymore. This was about justice, about honoring my father's last wish, about exposing whatever scheme had played out in those days after his death. I had no idea then that the truth would be even more shocking than I imagined, or that Diana's carefully constructed facade was about to crumble in the most spectacular way possible. It took 3 months of relentless investigation before we found our first real breakthrough. Mr. Harrison's contact at the bank discovered something odd. The day after the painting's supposed $500 sale, a wire transfer of $200,000 had been deposited into an offshore account linked to Diana. "That's not all," Mr. Harrison said, spreading documents across his desk. "The account was opened by a shell company registered to Marcus Bennett." The name hit me like a thunderbolt. Marcus Bennett was a notorious figure in the art world, known for acquiring undervalued pieces through questionable means and reselling them for massive profits. He had also been a regular at Diana's social events even before my father's death. They were working together, I whispered, the pieces finally clicking into place. Diana knew exactly what the painting was worth. Mr. Harrison nodded grimly, and $200,000 was likely just the down payment. These types of deals often involve much larger sums once the piece is authenticated and sold. Armed with this information, we hired a private investigator to track Bennett's recent activities. It didn't take long to discover that he had made several trips to Switzerland in the months following the painting's acquisition. Then came the news that changed everything. Dr. Martinez called me late one night, her voice trembling with excitement. "Sophia, you need to see this." She sent me a link to an upcoming auction at Christie's in Geneva. "Look at lot number 47. My heart nearly stopped. There, in the auction catalog, was my father's painting, but it wasn't listed as an anonymous medieval work anymore. The description read, "Previously unknown masterpiece by Hans Memling, circa 1470, recently discovered in a private American collection. The estimated value, $25 million. Hans Memling, one of the most renowned Flemish painters of the 15th century. My father had been right all along. The painting wasn't just special, it was a lost masterpiece. I immediately called Mr. Harrison. We need to stop that auction." The next 2 weeks were a blur of legal maneuvers and international phone calls. We filed injunctions, contacted Interpol's art crime unit, and reached out to every art authority who might be able to help. 3 days before the auction, Diana received an official call from Christie's. They needed to speak with her about the painting's provenance, its history of ownership. I made sure I was there when she took that call. The look on her face when she opened her front door and saw me standing beside the Christie's representative was priceless. All her careful composure cracked for just a moment before she tried to recover. "I don't understand," she said smoothly. "I sold that old painting to a local dealer. I have no idea how it ended up at Christie's." "Really?" I pulled out copies of her bank records. "Then perhaps you can explain the $200,000 wire transfer from Marcus Bennett's shell company, or the 3 meetings you had with him before my father's death?" Diana's face went pale. The Christie's representative, a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Blackwood, cleared her throat. "Mrs. Walker, we have reason to believe you knowingly participated in the fraudulent acquisition of a major artwork. This is a very serious matter." "You don't understand." Diana's voice shook slightly. "That painting wasn't valuable. It was just some old thing." "Stop lying," I cut in. "We found Dad's letter from the London Authentication Service. You knew exactly what you were selling and to whom. You and Bennett planned this even before Dad died, didn't you?" Her silence was all the confirmation we needed. The next few hours were intense. Under pressure from Christie's legal team and faced with evidence of her conspiracy with Bennett, Diana broke. She admitted everything. How Bennett had recognized the painting during a dinner party, how they had planned to wait until my father's death to make the sale look legitimate, how they had arranged the fake $500 transaction to cover the real deal. "Your father was a fool," she spat, finally dropping her sophisticated facade. "He could have sold it for millions, but he kept talking about preserving history and proper authentication. Bennett offered me a way to get what I deserved." "What you deserved?" I felt years of anger boiling over. "You married a kind, generous man who trusted you completely, and you betrayed him before he was even cold in his grave." Mrs. Blackwood had heard enough. Christie's immediately pulled the painting from the auction. Interpol launched an investigation into Bennett's art trafficking operations. But the most satisfying moment came when Mr. Harrison revealed his final surprise. "Remember that unfinished codicil to your father's will?" He pulled out a document with a flourish. It may not have been properly witnessed for the painting, but it was valid for everything else. "Your father changed his mind about leaving the house and its contents to Diana. The only reason we couldn't execute it immediately was that the painting needed special designation as a potentially significant artwork." Diana's face turned an interesting shade of gray as she realized what this meant. Not only was she facing criminal charges for art fraud, but she had also lost her claim to my father's estate. The painting was recovered from Bennett's Geneva vault and returned to its rightful place, not on the auction block, but in a special exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. "Unknown Memling masterpiece discovered" rigged the headlines. My father's name was credited with its preservation and discovery. I stood in the museum on opening day, watching visitors marvel at the painting that had once hung in my father's study. The medieval banquet scene now revealed all its secrets under proper lighting and careful restoration. Every hidden symbol, every masterful brushed stroke my father had always known were there. Diana faced criminal charges along with Bennett. The investigation revealed they had planned similar schemes with other collectors, though none as valuable as our Memling. She accepted a plea deal that required her to return everything she had taken from my father's estate. 1 year later, I sat in my father's restored study, now filled again with the art collection Diana had tried to disperse. The Memling's place on the wall was empty. It belonged to the world now, telling its story to thousands of visitors at the Met. But I didn't mind. Above the fireplace hung a different piece, a beautiful photograph of my father standing before his beloved painting. his eyes bright with the joy of someone who truly understood what he was seeing. I picked up the small journal he had left behind, filled with his observations about the painting over the years. All the details he had noticed, all the research he had done. He had known its value all along, not just in money, but in history and beauty. The real worth of art isn't in its price tag, he had written. It's in the story it tells, the history it preserves, and the truth it reveals about both its creator and its collectors. Diana had seen only dollar signs. Bennett had seen only profit. But my father had seen the soul of a masterpiece, and he had made sure it would be preserved for future generations to see as well. The money from my father's estate was restored to me, along with everything else Diana had tried to steal. But the real inheritance wasn't the wealth or even the art collection. It was the lesson my father had taught me about seeing beyond the surface, about valuing truth over profit, about protecting beauty and history for their own sake. Sometimes I visit the Memling at the Met, watching other people discover its mysteries just as my father and I once did. And every time, I think about how Diana thought she was so clever, selling a worthless old painting for $500. She never understood that true value isn't always obvious at first glance. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, waiting for someone with the patience and wisdom to recognize it. My father had that gift, and in teaching it to me, he left me something far more precious than any painting. He left me the ability to see beauty and truth where others saw only profit. The painting now bears a small plaque that reads, "Discovered and preserved by William Parker." Somewhere, I know my father is smiling, pleased that his beloved masterpiece finally has the audience it deserves, telling its story to the world just as he always knew it would.